If you were born before the 2000s, then you probably remember LimeWire, a popular software application most often used for illegally downloading music for free. At its peak, LimeWire was installed on a third of all computers in the world, but eventually it disappeared. So let's find out what happened to LimeWire. But first, I'd like to thank Fume for sponsoring this video, who leads the flavored air industry, which is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking. Fume has no vapor and no nicotine, so it isn't addictive. It offers great flavors like crisp mint and orange vanilla, so you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that has no electronics, batteries, or combustion. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, my viewers can use the code AppleExplained to get a free topper that slips onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code AppleExplained, or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey pack today. Now it's important to understand what LimeWire was, because most people using it weren't actually aware of how it worked. LimeWire was a peer-to-peer file sharing platform, which differs from traditional file downloading. Instead of using a web browser to locate files hosted on a web server, software was used to search through other users' computers for a file. Because these computers were owned by regular people, they were called peers instead of servers, but their function was essentially the same. Someone could host a file on their hard drive that other people could download. Then those new users could host the same file on their hard drive, making it faster for others to download. This community-driven approach to file sharing had several benefits. It was completely free, there were no restrictions imposed by a company, and you could access almost anything you wanted, all from the comfort of your home. But there was one problem. Distributing copyrighted files was illegal, and the vast majority of users were sharing and downloading copyrighted content like music, movies, TV shows, video games, and software. But it wasn't just LimeWire. Napster, Kazaa, BearShare, WinMX, Morpheus, Grokster, and more all utilized peer-to-peer file sharing, which inevitably led to users illegally distributing copyrighted content. So if these applications were illegal, how could they exist? Well, technically, the software itself wasn't illegal. There was nothing wrong with sharing files with others as long as users owned the copyright. With this protection, peer-to-peer applications were completely legal, and they became popular. Despite most users breaking copyright law, content owners rarely pursued legal action, since artists suing their fans was a bad look. In fact, Metallica tried suing Napster for copyright infringement in 2000, and they received a huge amount of backlash, since NetPD, an online consulting firm hired by Metallica, produced a list of over 335,000 Napster users who allegedly shared the band's songs online. This act alone was enough to spread false claims that Metallica were suing their fans, and many responded with outrage, prompting viral videos like this one that criticized the band for being rich, greedy sellouts.
Like, good afternoon, my name is, Lars Ulrich from Metallica. Who do you think you are? I mean, just, because you, made us rich, you think you can get free stuff? Songs that we spent upwards of, 24 to 48 hours writing and recording?
So with few legal avenues for artists and music labels, users were free to exchange songs on platforms like LimeWire without much worry. In fact, some did so proudly, calling themselves pirates. But most were just looking for a convenient way to listen to their favorite songs. Because in the 90s and early 2000s, there were only a couple ways to enjoy music, on a physical CD or on the radio. That was it. And those methods were both inconvenient and often quite expensive. Listening to the radio was the more affordable option, since you only needed to buy a stereo, which cost $100 to $200, but if you wanted the convenience of listening to specific songs on demand with no commercials, that meant buying CDs and a stereo or CD player. At $10 to $15 per disc, buying just 20 of your favorite albums would cost hundreds of dollars. There was also no way to buy songs individually. So if you were only interested in one hit single, you had to buy the album that featured it. Finally, the physical aspect of CDs meant going out to music stores like Circuit City or Coconuts, then spending time browsing and buying each album. This could be considered an enjoyable activity, but making a trip to the music store every time you wanted a new album often became a hassle. So, with the popularization of the internet, the concept of digital music gained traction, since it solved all the cost and convenience issues of physical CDs. Digital music could be shared on Napster or LimeWire for free, and you could download an entire album without ever leaving your home. You could also put digital music on a blank CD by using a computer's disk drive to burn songs. That way, you could still listen to your music in the car, on a portable CD player, or a home stereo. It was clear that downloading music from the internet was the future, but its legality turned off music labels from the concept, who aggressively pushed for physical CD sales, with no plans to offer their music on the internet. So users, whether they wanted to break the law or not, had no choice. Either download music from LimeWire or go out to Circuit City and spend time buying an album. But despite being free and convenient, LimeWire had flaws of its own, which caused problems for users, artists, and the company itself. The things that made LimeWire popular also made it vulnerable. It was a free, unregulated platform where people could upload and download anything, like music, movies, photos, and software, but also viruses, malware, and spyware, which were often cleverly hidden behind harmless file names. That meant these threats were invisible to the average LimeWire user who download what appeared to be a popular song only to expose their computer to a cyber attack. The infection typically happened in the background without a user's knowledge. Some of these malicious programs were simply an annoyance, slowing down computers, changing browser settings, or showing pop-up ads. But others were dangerous, stealing personal information, capturing a user's keystrokes, and even turning over system control to an outside entity. In total, viruses and malware from LimeWire is estimated to have infected millions of computers, made possible by the platform's decentralized peer-to-peer system, which made it easy for infected files to spread rapidly without any way to intervene or prevent its spread. This made LimeWire a breeding ground for cybercrime. But there were also practical issues with the platform. Sometimes files were labeled incorrectly, leading to confusion for users, but also frustration for artists, who were credited for songs they didn't make. This happened to parody artist Weird Al Yankovic so often that the first entry on his website's FAQ page was, "Unfortunately, there are a lot of song parodies floating around the internet being attributed to Al, which are in fact done by somebody else. Some of the titles are unprintable in a family-friendly website. These songs are not by Al. If you want to verify whether or not a song is actually by Al, check the catalog page." There was also confusion over the quality of music files. Oftentimes, after waiting for an album to download, users would find that its sound quality was so bad that the songs were unlistenable. So people would download an album from 3 or 4 different sources, then compare sound quality, keeping the best version and deleting the rest. But once songs were in a music library, there was another issue: missing metadata. Most people uploading albums to LimeWire didn't bother adding relevant information like album art, release date, record label, or even album name. Some files didn't even contain song titles. Instead, they'd appear as track 1, track 2, track 3, and so on. This meant, in order to prevent a disorganized music library that was impossible to browse or search through, users had to manually enter each song's metadata, which could become pretty time-consuming, especially for those with hundreds of albums. Now, LimeWire was aware of these issues, from viruses to incorrect attributions to low-quality files, but they didn't have any control over what people uploaded, so they couldn't moderate files or ban malicious users. Instead, LimeWire introduced a rating system, allowing users to rate files from 1 to 5 stars, hoping to make viruses and low-quality uploads easier for users to spot before downloading. But this only worked some of the time, since many malicious files provided the song or movie users expected while quietly infecting their system in the background. This made it difficult to identify which file may have contained the virus, although for the most part, the rating system did help separate low-quality uploads from higher-quality versions. So while LimeWire solved many of the inconveniences of physical CDs, it introduced new problems caused by unregulated file sharing. This gave other companies the opportunity to do something similar to LimeWire, but in a safer, more controlled environment. By the early 2000s, with millions of illegal song downloads happening each day, the music industry would do anything to shut down peer-to-peer file sharing sites like LimeWire. Their most used method was lawsuits, since back in 1999, the Recording Industry Association of America, or RIAA, won a court case against the file sharing platform Napster, who was forced to shut down in 2001, just 2 years after they were founded. So the RIAA took this same approach with LimeWire, but they knew the case for copyright infringement would be more difficult to prove. You see, LimeWire was developed during the court case between the RIAA and Napster, so its founder, Mark Gordon, was essentially given a blueprint of what not to do when creating a peer-to-peer file sharing platform. He was able to build the software in a way that avoided the legal issues that had taken down Napster. This was accomplished by making LimeWire completely decentralized, which meant they never stored, managed, or transferred any files. Napster, on the other hand, was centralized and facilitated all file transfers through a server that they owned. Since Napster had direct control over the file sharing process, they were easily held liable for distributing copyrighted material. But because of LimeWire's decentralization, the RIAA had a harder time building a case against them, which is why, despite the platform being released in 2000, LimeWire didn't receive any lawsuits for over 6 years. This meant the platform had time to grow, and it grew quickly, adding millions of new users every year. This resulted in hundreds of millions of illegal music downloads annually, costing the music industry billions. In fact, ever since LimeWire's release in 2000, album sales began to drop for the first time since CDs were invented in the early 80s. Customers were making it clear that they preferred getting their music online, whether it was legal or not. The music industry had to respond to piracy with more than just lawsuits, since when they successfully shut down one file sharing platform like Napster, a new one like LimeWire simply took its place. So the major record labels went to work building a legal alternative to piracy, and in 2001 they released 2 online music platforms. MusicNet, which was a joint venture between record companies Warner Music Group, BMG, EMI, and a software company called Real Networks. It was a subscription-based service that gave users access to a library of about 100,000 licensed songs for $9.95 a month. But there was a catch. Users wouldn't be allowed to download songs, which was crucial in the early 2000s. Back then, Wi-Fi was virtually non-existent, and the devices people used to listen to music, like stereos, MP3 players, and CD players, had no internet connection, and therefore couldn't take advantage of music streaming. Users needed to download songs and oftentimes burn them onto disks. The problem was they couldn't do that with MusicNet. Technically, users could download songs onto their computer for $19.95 a month, but they couldn't be burned onto a disc or even transferred to an MP3 player. This was because record labels locked song files with digital rights management or DRM restrictions to prevent piracy. The second online music platform was called PressPlay, created by record labels Sony Music Entertainment and Universal Music Group with a team of their own software engineers. It worked in a similar way to MusicNet, charging users $15 per month to stream songs, but there were lots of restrictions. For example, each month users could only stream 500 songs, download 50 songs, and burn 10 songs to a CD. And if that wasn't bad enough, not every song could be downloaded, and users couldn't burn more than 2 tracks from the same artist to a CD. So not only were these services incredibly inconvenient, but they were also confusing and difficult to use. After a year of operation, hardly anyone was using MusicNet or PressPlay. Piracy had reached an all-time high, while album sales continued to drop. Record label executives were panicking, while customers were begging them for a simple, convenient way to buy songs online, and one of those customers happened to be Steve Jobs. Frustrated by how record labels were handling piracy, Steve Jobs called up executive Paul Vittich at Warner Music Group to complain about everything they were doing wrong with MusicNet, and how the music industry had no idea what they were doing. He explained that the best software engineers weren't working in the music industry, they were working for tech companies like Apple. So if record labels wanted the best online music store that could bring down platforms like LimeWire, they should work with Apple. Jobs shared his idea for what would become the iTunes Music Store as Vittich listened closely. He responded, "That's exactly what we need." So Apple went to work on a beta version of the software that could be demoed to music executives in an effort to persuade them to abandon MusicNet and PressPlay and partner with Apple instead. The concept of the iTunes Music Store was quite simple. It would be integrated into Apple's existing iTunes Music player that ran on every Macintosh, and would be available on Windows with the release of the Music Store, making the platform accessible to virtually every computer user on Earth. It would be the first thing users saw when opening iTunes, and it would be easy to navigate. Jobs insisted that users didn't want to rent or stream their music, they wanted to own it, download it, and do everything with their iTunes songs that they could with songs from physical CDs, like burning them to as many discs as they wanted, copying songs to music players like iPods, and transferring songs to other computers. And only offering albums wasn't enough. Piracy had made individual song downloads more popular. iTunes would have to compete by making songs available for purchase individually, at an affordable price of 99 cents each. Music executives loved the iTunes Music Store's simplicity. It was something anyone could use without much of a learning curve, and Apple's base of almost 1 million iPod users meant there would be interest in the store at launch. But there was one big problem. Record labels wanted the same DRM restrictions on songs purchased from iTunes as on MusicNet and PressPlay. Specifically, the inability to copy them to CDs, other computers, and more than one music player. Jobs didn't understand this approach. He felt that songs purchased from iTunes should have the same flexibility as songs purchased on CDs, but music executives disagreed. So both parties compromised and settled on a solution called FairPlay, a DRM restriction software made by Apple that imposed some limits designed to prevent piracy, like authorizing a maximum of 5 computers to play a user's purchased music, only allowing songs to be transferred to iPod music players, allowing a user to burn a playlist to a maximum of 7 CDs, and the inability to share music to other people's devices or computers. This meant iTunes songs were more restrictive than those copied over from a physical CD, but users would have much more freedom than with MusicNet or PressPlay. Since Apple was able to convince the top 5 biggest record labels to sell their entire music catalogs on iTunes, the platform had over 200,000 songs at launch, more than double any other online music store. In 2003, the service went live for Mac and Windows users in the US. During its introduction, Jobs said, "We believe that 80% of the people stealing stuff don't want to be. There's just no legal alternative. So the way to beat piracy isn't to prosecute people for stealing, it's to compete with it." And he appeared to be right, since the iTunes Music Store reached 1 million song downloads in its first week, faster growth than any online music platform ever. For the last 3 years, LimeWire had existed without any serious competition, but with Apple entering the space, that was about to change. LimeWire didn't make any public statements about the iTunes Music Store's introduction, likely because they were dealing with more pressing matters, like, for example, making money. Ever since they were founded, LimeWire had problems generating revenue, mainly because their software was free and the files their users downloaded were also free. They did place ads in the application, but selling spots was a challenge, since the big brands that pay top dollar for advertising didn't want to be associated with a potentially illegal file sharing service. So in an effort to create enough cash flow to keep the company afloat, LimeWire employed 2 strategies, one less ethical than the other. First, they built a new application called LimeWire Pro, which offered 2 payment tiers, one at $21.95 that included 6 months of updates, and a second at $35 with 1 year of updates. With millions of active users each month, LimeWire could have generated tens of millions of dollars a year from their pro service, even if only a fraction of users bought it. But being a legally ambiguous file-sharing platform meant users were hesitant to turn over their credit card information, especially since the sales pitch for LimeWire Pro wasn't very compelling. It promised to deliver faster download speeds by connecting users to 10 file hosts instead of 8, but most people noticed very little speed improvements. LimeWire Pro also promised more extensive and accurate search results, although this was only helpful when trying to locate less popular files, something very few users found themselves doing. Upgrading also removed ads and added access to customer support, but these benefits didn't address the service's biggest inconveniences, like mislabeled files, missing metadata, and hidden viruses. But the biggest obstacle to selling LimeWire Pro was LimeWire itself, where users ended up sharing the Pro application for free, allowing them to enjoy the benefits without paying. So the company tried a second, less ethical way to make money, by secretly including spyware in LimeWire's download file. They began with LimeShop, a piece of software developed by Moxie Interactive used for affiliate marketing. It worked by installing itself on users' computers without their knowledge, then tracked their online browsing and shopping habits. LimeShop would inject ads and pop-ups that users had to dismiss, then redirect them to different affiliate sites, allowing LimeWire to earn commissions when users made online purchases. This was a decent way for LimeWire to make money, but it cost them users' trust, because eventually people began discovering LimeShop on their computers and figured out where it came from. Many tried uninstalling LimeWire in an effort to remove LimeShop, but it didn't work. Despite being downloaded together, the software couldn't be removed together, leading to widespread backlash among users who demanded that LimeWire stop bundling spyware with their download file and offer an easy way to remove LimeShop from existing computers. In 2004, the company complied and promised to stop including other software with the LimeWire application. This put LimeWire in a tough position. They weren't making much money from their Pro application, they'd lost the affiliate marketing revenue from LimeShop, and they'd violated any trust users had in their company. Now they had two problems on their hands, a PR disaster and a financial disaster. All while the iTunes Music Store celebrated its one-year anniversary with over 70 million songs sold. In 2006, the RIAA's lawsuit against LimeWire was finally ready, and it accused the file-sharing platform of facilitating copyright infringement by allowing users to illegally download and share copyrighted music without permission or compensation. The RIAA claimed this had cost the music industry billions of dollars, so they were seeking a judgment for that amount. LimeWire defended themselves by claiming they couldn't be held legally responsible for their users' actions, but the judge disagreed and allowed the case to proceed, forcing LimeWire into an expensive multi-year legal battle. The following year, an investigation into LimeWire revealed that of 123 randomly selected files on the platform, 37 contained malware, about 30% of the sample, demonstrating how powerless LimeWire was at protecting their users despite having years to address the issue. This was at a time when trust in the company was at an all-time low. LimeWire was losing their user base to legitimate music services like iTunes and Amazon MP3, which offered affordable songs without any risk of privacy violations or hidden malware. LimeWire recognized that they'd have to dramatically shift their business strategy if they wanted a chance at survival. So they turned to a familiar face for guidance, Napster, the company that began as a peer-to-peer file-sharing site and successfully transformed themselves into a legitimate music streaming platform. LimeWire wanted to take a similar path and compete with iTunes by offering a music store of their own. But there was one problem. Selling music legally meant licensing songs from record labels, the same record labels that were suing LimeWire. As you can imagine, they weren't exactly cooperative. So LimeWire was forced to work with independent music labels that weren't involved with the lawsuit, labels that didn't have popular artists. So when the LimeWire store opened in 2008, it didn't see much success, since the songs people wanted most weren't even available. Over the next 2 years, LimeWire grew increasingly desperate. It seemed they had no chance at beating the RIAA lawsuit, and users were continuing to abandon the platform. So, with few options left, LimeWire began bundling adware with their download file again, going back on their promise to users in 2004. This time, it was an Ask.com powered toolbar that provided LimeWire with a kickback every time it was installed or used to search the internet. While users were technically notified about the Ask.com toolbar during LimeWire's installation, it was often buried in the setup process and unselected by default. So those who weren't careful during installation found themselves with their browser homepage and default search engine switched to Ask.com. This again prompted backlash among remaining LimeWire users who were tired of being misled and sold out. In mid-2010, LimeWire had officially lost the lawsuit. The judge ruled in favor of the RIAA, declaring that LimeWire was responsible for enabling and encouraging illegal music sharing. They had until the end of the year to shut down their file sharing service and stop distributing their software. LimeWire agreed to comply, marking the end of a decade-long operation. But something strange happened just 1 month before LimeWire closed. A secret group of developers released something called LimeWire Pirate Edition, which was essentially the LimeWire Pro software that operated without dependence on LimeWire's servers. This meant people could continue using LimeWire despite the company no longer existing. Peer-to-peer file sharing platforms have always been the hydra of the software world. Cutting one down only causes more to sprout up. But their popularity has fallen dramatically over the last 20 years due to services like the iTunes Music Store, Spotify, and Apple Music that offer affordable ways to conveniently and safely enjoy music. So that is what happened to LimeWire. Don't forget to check out our sponsor Fume. This is Greg with Apple Explained. Thanks for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next video.